We'll just wait a minute or two to allow a couple people who might be joining a tad late. Otherwise, yeah, we're going to be continuing. I decided we're going to continue our theme a little bit. We're looking at the Parsha this week, Emor. But because we had so much fun talking about Yom Kippur 2 weeks ago, or was it last week? No, did we do last week, Kippur?
It was last week.
Last week. You're right. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Yom. That's right. And remote. We're going to talk a little bit more about Yom Kippur today, but in a slightly different version, a slightly different way, having to do more with Yom Kippur, the rituals. Excuse me. We talked about the rituals a little bit last time. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about, I suppose, what it is, the mindset that we're supposed to have that day. Okay, the mindset that we're supposed to have that day, and looking at, because in this week, Emor, there's a few different times in the Bible that it goes through the cycle of the calendar, right? It talks about it this week. It does it in Parashat Pinchas, and it also does it in Shemot. Okay, so today we're talking, it focuses more on what the purpose of the holiday is from a spiritual perspective. In Pinchas, it talks about what sacrifices are specifically required in what order, right? Which would be weird. You would think that one should happen in Leviticus and Vayikra, because that's all about the sacrifices, right? So why is it in Pinchas and not here? That's a different question for another time. Maybe when we get to Parashat Pinchas, we'll talk about that. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose of how we're going to get ourselves into the mindset of the service. So without further ado, and remember, as always, please, if you have any questions, make yourself known, raise your hand, sure, let me know if you questions you have. Sometimes I don't see you, and I do apologize, but please, please, please make yourself known. So away we go. Okay, so we are looking here in chapter 23 of Leviticus. I was very close to talking about counting of the Omer, because the introduction of the holiday of Sukkot is actually quite fascinating, but I'll save that. We'll talk about that next year. So we have here right away, what's very unique is the way the holiday is introduced, right? Because normally, there is something, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, and what's the very next word most of the time? Anybody? Or you're all on mute. Daber el Bnei Israel, right? God spoke to Moses saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, right? It doesn't say that here. Here, it's Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, ach. Now, ach is, in modern Hebrew, you would translate ach as not brother, that's the different kind of ach. In this case, ach is mark. There's some older translations that hear it too, or something like that. But okay, it's on this day, on the 10th of the 7th month, because recall, Tishrei is the 7th month. Nisan is the 1st month. Even though we flip the calendar at Tishrei, right? It's still the 7th month. But okay, so the 1st of the month is Rosh Hashanah, and on the 10th of the month is what? Yom HaKippurim, right? Yom HaKippurim. On the 10th day of the month, of the 7th month, Yom HaKippurim hu, right? Is a day of atonement. Mikra Kodesh, it is a holy day. Yelachem, for you. Now here, ve'imitem. Now, obviously, because I've highlighted it, we're going to be dealing with that word. Ve'imitem. What does that word mean? Here they say self-denial. Sorry, this is supposed to be here highlighted like this. Ve'imitem et nafshotechem. I'm sorry. Right? Ve'imitem et nafshotechem. So if you would literally translate that, practicing self-denial is a very nice modern translation, but that's not the literal translation of this word here, okay? That's not what it actually means. Literally speaking, it means the initem, oppress or afflict, et nafshotechem, your souls. Okay, afflict your souls. Now, knowing what we know about Yom Kippur, what is it that we're supposed to be doing on Yom Kippur? Well,
Fast.
I'm sorry?
Fasting.
Fasting,
all day.
right? What else?
Abstaining from
Atoning.
everything.
Well, right. So who said atoning?
Atoning. Yes.
That's the purpose. Remember last week we talked about getting that atonement, which different ways to do it. And that quote from last week is going to come back up again today. But the main purpose of Yom Kippur is the atonement. Because if you look here, Yom HaKippurim, this is not actually saying the name of the day is the Day of Atonement. It is saying that on the 10th day of the 7th month, that is a day of atonement for you, lowercase, not uppercase. This is what you're supposed to be doing on that day. Now, we've taken that and made it that day and gave it that name, excuse me. Okay, that's fine. But then all of a sudden, because not even, we're in chapter 23 here. So not even 7 chapters ago, it was saying it's a day, was it? Ki b'yom hazeh yichaper aleichem, right? It should be atonement for you. It didn't say anything about afflicting your souls. We went through that whole ritual, right? The very detailed ritual of what that that whole sequence was supposed to be with the priest. He goes in and out 3 times and then whatever. Nowhere in there did it say anything about afflicting your soul or practicing self-denial or anything like that. Nowhere did it say that. Okay, well, let's continue because I've taken the whole section here where it talks about Yom Kippur. Oops, let's turn that off. Sorry, I thought that was closed. Okay, so fine. You'll offer an offering to the Lord. So in all work you should not do. From that day, until that, right? From the middle until that entire day, throughout the day, excuse me, because Yom HaKippurim, because it is a day of atonement to atone on yourselves before God. Ki kol hanefesh asher lo te'uneh, and every soul who does not do this, again highlighted, from that on the entire day, v'nichrata me'ameha. Now that is a very, 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 very serious punishment. Okay? Now, what is the normal punishment of violating Shabbat? Sorry, I jumped the gun. Hold on. I jumped the gun. Hold that question. It's going to be clear why I'm asking that question, okay? V'chol hanefesh asher te'aseh kol melacha be'etzem hayom hazeh ve'avarati et hanefesh hahi mikerev hama. So any person who actually does work, okay, so first of all, anybody who doesn't practice self-denial on that whole day will be cut off from their people. And any soul that does work on that day will be blotted out from the midst of their people. And all the work you should do, you should not do, excuse me. This is a law for all time in wherever, in all of your settlements. Now here, Shabbaton hu lachem. This shall be, now how do they translate this here? It is a Shabbat of complete rest. Now, that's a nice translation again, but Shabbaton is literally a Shabbat of Shabbats.
Shabbat.
Right? Shabbat of Shabbat, which would lead me to conclude without any commentary, hey, Shabbat, I know Shabbat's important. So now you're saying Shabbat of Shabbat. Ooh, now we're really being serious here. Okay, Shabbat, this is a Shabbat of complete rest. It will be for you. And again, the initem, and you will practice self-denial or afflict your souls or whatever you want to call that. From the 9th of the month, the 9th of the month in the evening, which is the Erev Yom Kippur, me'erev ad erev, from the evening to the evening. Now, when does Shabbat or things go out? It doesn't say the evening; it's the part right before evening, really, when it should be. So what we learn here is why Yom Kippur like Shabbat, is actually 25 hours, not 24 hours, because it starts a little early and it's supposed to go a little bit later. Okay? Tishbetu Shabbatechem. You shall observe this, you shall observe your Shabbat. Now, a couple questions here. Why is that repeated 3 different times? Now I jumped the gun. Now you understand why I'm asking. The penalty for violating Shabbat is what? Someone said death, right? You says it in a couple different places. Mot yumat. If you violate for whatever the various different things, mot yumat, you will die. But this is saying it's roughly equivalent to Shabbat. So what was a punishment here?
Be dead to your people.
Yeah, right. You shall be cut off, karet, which is in many ways worse than death. Right? It's worse than death. Being cut off from your people is horrible. Anybody know what else you can do to get that? Chametz on Pesach will do it for you. Right? If you eat chametz on Pesach, it's very bad. It's not just a slap on the wrist. You get karet. You are cut off from your people. Okay? So thinking about that, why is this in a different category? We're saying this is Shabbat. So why are we getting cut off if we're not practicing self-denial or afflicting our soul or whatever you want, however you want to translate that? Why is it different? Why would they have a totally separate punishment for that? And some would argue a worse punishment.
Can I just ask you, when it says I will cause that person to perish is die.
Yeah.
From among his people. So we're talking about excommunication though, not death. Is that what we're talking about here?
Absolutely. No, it's I want to be clear. That's absolutely what they're saying, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Will cut
The
off.
next line. Oh, here.
Oh, person to perish from among his people. Yeah. That's the poetic way of saying I will take that person out from amongst
Okay.
the Bible, when the Bible's talking about killing someone, the punishment of death, it doesn't mince words. Mot yumat, you will put to death.
Okay.
Right? So when they don't use those words, it's very clear they're not talking about the death penalty here.
Okay.
Okay. So it's already setting up like that we already know. I mean, we already know that Yom Kippur is a day apart, right? It's a day unlike any other day that we have in our calendar, right? Probably part of the reason why it ended up becoming such a holy day, much more than other holidays, even though it doesn't have a lot going for it in the Bible. There's not a heck of a lot of explanation that's going on here. Now, Sukkot has a lot more. Pesach has a lot more. That's talking about Shavuot, not so much. But Pesach and Sukkot are the 2 main festivals.
Is it because Yom Kippur you have to atone as a community? So the community is
well, we'll see a little bit here, but the rabbis really add in a lot of meaning and a lot of importance to Yom Kippur. Now, what I'm not sure is that after the fact, because everybody else was already observing it, or is it because it really was and they wanted to big that up? I'm actually not 100% sure which one came first, but it's clear that there is a lot of things going on here to really emphasize the importance of Yom Kippur, even though it's not always borne out in the amount of real estate in the text, because this is it. By the way, these couple verses, that's it, right? I didn't copy in Sukkot or Pesach, but that's a lot more than it goes about talking about here. It's it. What are you supposed to do in Yom Kippur? You practice self-denial, and you don't do any work. That's it. That's it. Here, and later on, we're going to see where they derive those other the things. What does it actually mean to self-deny? Okay, but okay. So we have also in the midst here before in Devarim. Sorry, not Devarim, Bimidbar in Numbers, in Parashat Pinchas, where it's talking about all the different sequence of the calendar, starting with the normal day, Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and then the cycle of the holidays. It does again tell you, "Uva'asar lachodesh hashvi hazeh mikra kodesh yelachem." This is a holy day for you, which means it's not like a Rosh Chodesh or things like that. It's a holy day, and ve'initem et nafshotechem, right? And you will practice self-denial. Kol melacha lo ta'asu. Okay, and you shall do no work. Then it goes into what the sacrifice will be, but it gives you the purpose of the whole of why you're doing it, which is interesting because some of the other festivals it doesn't tell you why you do it, whereas here it does. Okay, it still mentions here. It's just a touch point. It uses the same exact wording, "V'initem et nafshotechem," and to further emphasize. And it's calling into question now because don't read that yet. But we know on Shabbat has certain rules, right? That it's and for us in the Jewish calendar to understand how it works, one of the concepts that we're taught is things that happen more frequently are more important. They take precedence, right? The concept is tadir, the eno tadir, tadir kodem. Okay, if you have to, loosely translating, if you have to choose between something that happens regularly and not regularly, you emphasize the thing that happens more regularly. So, for example, if a holiday lands on Shabbat, on a holiday you only call 5 people up for L'Aliyah, but on Shabbat you call 7. So, which one should you do?
Shabbat.
You call 7, right? Because Shabbat, let's check here. How often does a Chag fall? Once a year. How often does Shabbat happen?
52 times a year.
Well, yeah, once a week. So by my math, let me see. Yes, that is more frequent than once a year, right? So the Shabbat, the minhag or the rituals of Shabbat would take precedent, which is not to say you don't do any of the rituals of the Yom Tov, of the festival, but you do emphasize the ones on Shabbat. Also, you would say Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach, not Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom, right? Shabbat takes precedence, okay? Also, on the Shabbat of the festival, the prayers that you would say the stuff for Shabbat, then you add in the special stuff for the Chag, okay? So in that sense, then, what we also know about Shabbat is there's certain things you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, right? You're not allowed to fast on Shabbat, right? You're not allowed to be publicly mourning on Shabbat, right? So if someone is sitting Shiva, when Shabbat comes in, they actually pause their Shiva and go to Shul,
I
right?
thought the Shiva actually ended early.
Only if Shabbat would have been the last day of Shiva.
Okay.
Let's say the person died on Wednesday, the funeral was on Thursday. You would sit Shiva on Friday, but Friday afternoon or wherever it is, you would get up from Shiva, right? And then you would go to Shul because the minhag, the joy of Shabbat, it's a public celebration, trumps your private mourning, which it's a very difficult concept for people, but that's just the way it is. There's some traditions that in a nod to the pain that the family is suffering, they don't sit through the first elements of singing of Shabbat, the Kabbalat Shabbat service. They come in at the end of L'Chadodi. And there's that line that we say at the end of L'Chadodi, Hamakom Yenachem. Because again, Shabbat is that important, it supersedes even the laws of mourning. The private mourning. The public displays of mourning you don't do on Shabbat. Now, that also has to do with, remember, you can't fast. So if there's a fast day that's going to land on Shabbat, you push it off, including Tisha B'Av, for example, right? If the 9th of Av falls on Shabbat, you push it off. You don't do it on Shabbat. If the fast of Esther or the fast of the firstborn, any of the other minor fasts, if they fall on Shabbat, you don't fast on Shabbat, you push it off to a different day, to Saturday night, Sunday, or whatever the case may be. Okay? That's how important Shabbat is. What's the one exception to that rule? Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. If Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat,
Oh,
you fast
You
on
fast.
Shabbat. You do it, right? So that is an incongruity there, because if we're talking about here the ini temet, afflicting your soul, what's the connotation that you have in your mind? What's the connotation you have in your mind when you're using the word like practicing self-denial or afflicting your soul?
It's very serious.
It's very, well, more than it's serious,
Yeah.
it's somber, it's mournful, it's
Yeah.
not positive.
No.
However, we have already established. Sorry, I didn't. There's many different places I could have I could have quoted this from. It was a summary. You know what? Next time I'll actually put one of the sources there. But anyway, we've already established that Shabbat supersedes mournful things, so they do not happen on Shabbat. Yet we are still doing Yom Kippur on Shabbat. Why could that be? Give me two answers of why that could be. Or just one, but there are at least two possibilities here. Who has the thoughts? Anna, you're muted, but go for it.
The holiest time of the year.
Right. So, in spite of Shabbat being what it is that holiness trumps the Shabbat, because remember we said, where was it? Shabbat Shabbaton, right? So Shabbat Shabbaton. So even though normally we wouldn't do that, it is that holy that it trumps it. The mournfulness, so we would still do it. What's another possibility?
Is it a calculation thing?
It's not a calculation thing.
Not between like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where you have this.
Oh, that you have to do those 10 days, so it has to be on that day,
Yeah.
potentially. But the other option is that it's not an actual sad day. It's not a mournful day. It's not something that we would have to push off from Shabbat.
So you should be joyous in your affliction.
Well, you should be joyous, and we're going to look that perhaps afflicting is maybe not a good translation. Okay, now I'm going to try and prove that. There are two. Again, I want to be clear. There are two different ways we could look at this. Okay, it is either that the holiness of Yom Kippur is such that it pushes off the normal joyousness of Shabbat in a way that no other sad day can do, right? Including from your personal mourning of Shiva to the public fast days that are mournful. Like there's no doubt Tisha B'Av is absolutely, there's no other way around it. It is a sad day. And even still, it's not pushed off. So number one, Shabbat does not push off the sadness of Yom Kippur because Yom Kippur is such a level of holiness. Or the second way to read that is, well, it's not actually a sad day, so it wouldn't be pushed off. There's no need for it to be pushed off because it's not mournful. Okay?
But it is somber.
Somber is different than mournful. Okay, I want to be clear that it's serious, absolutely. Somber, yes, but the somber is not necessarily the equivalent from a halachic perspective as mournful. Okay, you can be serious, you can be somber, and yet has no interference with the mood that you're trying to create on Shabbat. Okay.
Rabbi Kaiserblueth,
Yes.
didn't we establish last week that one is supposed to have done all the cleansing before turning up for Yom Kippur?
Yes.
Wasn't that what we learned? So all the hard stuff has been sort of done.
Well, yes and no, because remember, it's the cleansing that you do before Yom Kippur is between you and somebody else. The stuff on Yom Kippur, remember, that is the trigger that allows you to then engage with the Almighty on Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
Right? Remember that?
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. Thank you, Meryl. Anna, a question?
But it still gives a sort of template rubric for self-denial, doesn't it? How to do your own self-flagellation, shall we say? If you've done the work with the other,
hold on, Meryl. Let me just correct you really quickly, and I want to just highlight that word, self-flagellation. I want to make sure we don't use that term because we're not. But to make a point is that we're not into that,
No.
we're not trying to injure ourselves or hurt ourselves.
Yeah.
The point is about focusing yourself.
Yes.
So punishing and causing pain is not what we want to go for. But okay, but finish your thought.
Yes, so I was just saying that we, in doing our work on coming to terms with our issues with our neighbour, we've learned a way into coming to terms with our own deficits and our own things that need to be addressed if we are going to arrive at Yom Kippur ready for atonement.
Possibly. Hold that thought. We're gonna try and dissect a little bit to see which one of these different understandings it could be. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Anna, you had a question as well. It's fine. By the way, those of you who've never been, ask away at any point. It's no problem. I want to make sure, because a lot of the way we do this is you're building from one thought to the next to the next. So if you're not clear on one thing, let me know, please, so we don't continue, because otherwise it might not make sense. Anna, go for it.
Sorry, this is a comment more than a question. I always see Yom Kippur as, there's the self-denial, but also the idea of transcendence as well, and that we go beyond. In a way, it's more powerful than the Shabbat. In a sense, I know that the Sabbath is supposed to be the sort of the pinnacle of the week. In a way, I imagine Yom Kippur to be sort of all the Shabbats combined together, the year in the one day.
In a way, and that word transcendence, hold on to that. We're going to come back to that. Okay. It's specifically to this. So hold on to that thought. Okay. So, any other questions up to this point? We understand the two different, actually, you know what? I will write that down here, but I want to make sure we understand the two different paths this could mean and why it's there. So this is what we talked about last week, this verse, right? Ki v'yom hazeh yichaper alechem letaher etchem b'kol chatotechem lifnei Adonai titaru. And this is given the rationale in Acharei Mot, 2 parashiot ago, because remember last week was a double parsha. But it's talking about here, it is giving the rationale for what is supposed to be happening on that day, right? And we're not going to go into that whole discussion of how you can parse this verse, as fascinating as that was. But does it say anything here about practicing self-denial or afflicting your soul or anything like that? No. It's telling the whole point of the day is it's a day to cleanse yourself, right? Now, how you do that, well, right? And there's a whole bunch of different explanations of what that looks like. One of them that we talked about was confession, right? And that was the lead up to prepare for that. Suffice it to say here, there's no mention whatsoever of self-denial when it's talking about the rituals of Yom Kippur that the high priest would do. So why not? Why is that not here? If that's such an integral part of the rituals of Yom Kippur, where it talks about it in every other place where it talks about Yom Kippur, yet here where it's talking about the whole theater and the whole detail of the rituals, here it doesn't say anything. It doesn't talk about it at all. That's weird. That seems to me to be a glaring oversight. Tim?
Is it something to do with being in the Holy of Holies and the saying of the Lord's name?
Go. When you mean go?
The Tetragrammaton. So that if at that point you're that close to God, then, and it's the closest that anyone ever comes in the year, then it's not a form of denial.
Okay. Yeah. So what you're interesting. So it's you don't need. Sorry. Are you saying then you don't need to be doing those things of denial because you're in the Holy of Holies?
Or you shouldn't be, because it's. Sorry,
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
Yeah. So what I was thinking was that that's not actually anything to do with self-denial there.
Right.
That process. That's actually about being closer.
Being
Isn't, can I just ask you, isn't this about the high priest acting on your behalf so that you are cleansed? So it's not to do with your own self-denial. This is the actual action of the high priest.
This is the action of the high priest.
Mm.
So, Shira, then are you saying that the high priest doesn't need to fast and doesn't need to do all these other things?
No,
Because
he
by the
does.
way,
That's,
if
Yeah.
the whole quote there, the high priest is doing all those other things.
Yeah.
You looked at it briefly last week.
yeah,
He is fasting.
yeah,
I want to be clear. It's not that the high priest isn't eating, and
No.
the high priest is not eating, is not drinking. Presumably no, he actually says that also, refraining from sexual relations and all that other stuff. My point, I want to be clear. Sorry, that wasn't so clear. My point here, it doesn't use the words ve'initem et nafshotechem. It's not saying that he's afflicting his soul. He is doing those other things,
Yeah.
but it's not using the language that we use in other places, which is a little bit jarring. It's like, that's not there.
No, but the outcome is, what the ultimate point of the day is, to cleanse you of all your sins
Mhm.
through atonement and self-denial.
Well, stop. It's through atonement.
Atonement, yeah.
Right.
But self-denial will put you in the right frame of mind in order to atone.
Potentially. That's one route that we're going to go down. So exactly, it's not there because it seems to be saying here, perhaps here, that the denying of your soul, the initem, is not what is required to get kapara. Okay, by which I mean the kapara, the atonement, is a process throughout that whole day. The afflicting or denial or whatever is not what gets you that. Perhaps it helps you, sets you up to be able to do it, but it's not in and of itself what gives you that. Okay, because if it was, that would be written here. That would be in this sentence, but it's not. Okay, you understand?
Yeah.
Good. So what I've done here now is, throughout different parts of the Bible, there are where it uses the same root. Okay, in Shemot, where it's talking about that the Israelites, they were afflicted, right? Leman anato, right? So they set taskmasters over them to oppress them, right? And again, anuoto, oppressed. They were oppressed. Okay, the same root, and again has a very, very negative connotation here. Okay, in Deuteronomy, this should be familiar to some of you. Arami oved avi vayerd. Sorry, I skipped a lot. Va'anita ve'amarta lifnei Adonai Elohecha. Arami oved avi vayerd mitzrayma vayagor sham. Blah 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 blah. Right, but it's interesting here in the English. You shall then recite as follows. The Anita is not really present in the English translation. The Amarta, and you should recite before them as follows. Anita is not translated there at all, which is a little bit bizarre. In the Haggadah, usually it is, and there it's and you should answer him and say, what's the answer? What's the question right before?
Why were we enslaved?
Well, there's actually 4 questions right before. Right? This is the beginning of the Magid section, and you should say, and this is the beginning of the story and how it goes. So there, midrashically, they use Ve'anita here, even though that's not, the connotation here is not you shall answer. Sorry, the denotation there is not, the literal translation would not be to answer. You could, you can say it. So they use that, and in the Haggadah, and you shall answer him. Even though here, that is not what the meaning is trying to convey. It has nothing to do with answering a question. But in the Haggadah, they do that, which is quite clever from the rabbis, right? You should answer the question. Well, right, but we've established that this verb, or this word, excuse me, has a connotation of afflicting or denying or oppressing. Nothing to do with answering a question. But in certain ways, you could use that as the word to answer, which I thought was just a very, very clever way that the rabbis use this word here. Okay. when another place where you have the episode of the golden calf, right? And you have it in one sentence 3 different times that the root comes, right? The scene, right? God tells Moses when he's in the middle of this amazing experience, God says, hey, I think you need to go down. There's something crazy going on down there, right? And Joshua heard the sound of the people. I love this translation. Boisterousness. New JPS says it. I want to be clear. Many times it's not necessarily a literal translation, but it really captures the flavor of what the sequence is trying to convey. I just really like that. But anyway, it says Kol milchama b'machaneh. There is a cry of war in the camp. But Moses said, no, it is not the sound, or sorry, it's not the tune of triumph. It is not the tune of defeat. But what is it? It is the song, it is the sound of song that I hear. Song. This is, I mean, and that's the way they translate it. So that is just very, very, because now the word really is about this affliction, or and it's, the Bible is using this word deliberately because what's Moses feeling right now? He just has this incredible radical amazement with the presence of God at the revelation, and it's been shattered completely. And so it's using the sound of the tune. I love how JPS does this, but I also hate how they've done this because it's not capturing really the dissonance that Moses must be feeling. And that's why this word is used. The sound, kol, and givurah is victory, but tune is not, it doesn't quite give enough of that, that it could be maybe, I think maybe the sound of a cry would be probably a better one. Right? I think that would work better here. The cry of the up, or the cry of of the victory, or the cry of defeat. But it is the sound of it is the sound of a cry. Kol anot is the sound of a cry that I hear. Right? And I love that you could play with this here. That is it the people crying, or is Moses crying?
Or both.
It could be both. So that's why I should have retranslated the way I wanted to. But anyway, so when you say the cry, that really works I think would work much better here if we translate it that way. Okay, and that word, that cry, that dissonance, that inside you, that carries the same similar connotation that we saw with before the initem and nafshotechem. Okay, so. Now that we've established that there are several different ways we can translate this word, and there seems to be, most of the time it's used, a negative connotation with affliction, right? Now I'm going to totally rock your world, because in the Mishnah, it tells all about the words of Yom Kippur, and most of us have probably studied and learned, and in the Mishnah, it lays out, by the way, for the first time in the oral tradition, the rabbi is telling you the 5 things that we're not supposed to do on Yom Kippur, right? No eating, no drinking, no bathing, no anointing, no sexual relations, no leather shoes, really comfortable shoes, right? So then you have this gem in Mishnah Ta'anit, the Mishnah that has to do, the Ta'anit is fast days, and it says, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Lo hayu yamim tovim leYisrael kechamisha asar be'av u chayom ka'kippurim. Right? There were no days of joys in Israel greater than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. What? Hang on a minute. First of all, 15th of Av. Anybody know what that is?
The festival of love, isn't it?
Absolutely right. The festival of love, Tu B'Av, right? That's the Jewish Valentine's Day, if you want to call it that. But okay. And fine, okay, that's great. Festival of love, that's a great day of joy. Okay, sold. I can understand that. But Yom Kippur, what's going on there? What? Right? Joy. But we've just had how many references to affliction, self-denial, oppression, whatever, and joy? What is happening here? What is happening here? Anna?
From the esoteric side of things, I imagine the relationship that we aspire to have with God in our process of.
Okay. So you're talking about that if it all goes what it's supposed to be, then we have rebuilt that relationship with God. Okay. Matt, you had a comment?
Yeah, and if it's off topic, I apologize. But as we established last week, about being sincere and basically it won't count unless you'll never do it again.
Yeah.
And one of the paths of Judaism is to continually better yourself and be a better version of what we believe in the rules or the laws.
Uh-huh.
Isn't today the literal embodiment of the goal of a Jew? Or that day, I should say, not today. But
Sorry. Oh, I see what you. Okay. So then, assuming again, sort of similar to Anna, but slightly different in that if we accomplish that which we're setting out to do, we've improved ourselves. That's a very joyous day. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we're closer
So
to what
then
we aspire to be.
And we've essentially achieved a better version of ourselves and a better world, essentially.
Because if the whole community does it.
To that.
Because if it's we've improved
Yeah.
the world, and therefore we've accomplished that goal. Happy days. We've celebrated. We've accomplished it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works too. That's one absolutely possible explanation as well. Saif?
I don't know where I've read this, but that also commemorates with a number of sort of significant days where Hashem has sort of revealed himself
Absolutely.
to people throughout the year. So things like, I don't know, saving Jonah from the whale happened on that same day, or Adam's atonement happened on the same day.
Yep.
And some other things. I think King Solomon got given kingdom.
When Moses goes back up after the golden calf, goes back up, and on the Yom Kippur, because the math works out, because Moses goes up on the first day of on Shavuot, comes down 40 days later, which is the 17th of Tammuz, right? What happens on the 17th of Tammuz? It's a fast day where the walls of Jerusalem are breached. However, it's also, according to tradition, the day that Moses comes down, because it's 40 days after Shavuot. What happened? The golden calf smashed the things. Moses then goes right back up. What's 40 days after 17th of Tammuz? Yom Kippur. Right? The timing works. It's one of these things where it's like, and that means that God forget, because then Moses goes back up, and God forgave us for the sin of the golden calf. So also on the 10th of the 10th of Tishrei, that sin is forgiven as well. So you're right. A lot of very auspicious things happened according to tradition on the 10th of Tishrei, Yom Kippur. So again, maybe it's referencing that we accomplished those things. Let's look at the commentary. There's a couple different ones we could use. Yom Kippur is a day of celebration, for on it, Jews receive atonement for their sins, right? Yom Kippur, in sharp contrast with Tisha B'Av, is not a day of mourning, but rather a day of celebration. Furthermore, according to tradition, the second set of tablets were given to Israel in Yom Kippur, which is in essence collective forgiveness for the sin of the golden calf. There you go, right? Now, there's also elements that calls back to that we celebrate. Anybody been in Israel for Yom Kippur?
No.
No, I've been there twice, and at the Kotel, it's actually amazing. At the end, people come. They've been fasting. They haven't even broken their fast yet. They just come and they're dancing hysterically and ecstatically, and it's incredible feeling of ultimate joy. Part of that is there's an idea that just like on Tu B'Av, on Yom Kippur, the young single ones would go out and they would have arranged marriages, or not necessarily arranged marriages, but they would introduce one another, and the joyousness of partnership and that kind of thing, which is perhaps one of the interpretations of why we read the sexual prohibitions at Mincha and Yom Kippur, because, hey, you guys are about to go out and party. Remember, it's like that talk you would get from your parents before you would go out, right? Hey, you're about to go and don't be stupid, right? Be careful, be safe, right? Don't accidentally sleep with these people you're not supposed to sleep with, sort of thing. Is one understanding of why we would do that reading on Yom Kippur. Not saying the only one, but one of them. Okay. So according to this, this is one explanation why Yom Kippur would be such a joyous day. And noticeably, it doesn't, it sort of implies, but it doesn't really explicitly state that you are coming that close to be with God, right? It doesn't say that here. But again, you must understand, I really do censor myself when I'm creating these source sheets, just because I could go on and we could be here for like 3 hours. I try not to do that to you guys. Yes, Anna.
I mean, aren't we supposed to be like Moses going back up the mountain to receive the?
There is some elements of that, yeah. I would say actually more than Moses going up to the mountain. We're probably the better metaphor perhaps might be the high priest going into the inner sanctum, right? And we do it collectively, right? Would be maybe a better model there, a better metaphor. So remember when I said it didn't have that in Leviticus in that chapter 16 where it talks about that? As all good rabbis, I was quoting selectively out of context because, by the way, it is here. Ha ha ha, fooled you, right? It is here, right? Te'uneh et nafshotechem. But I want to be absolutely clear, it is here, but it's not here, in that it doesn't say about the priest doing it. It says about us doing it. Okay? Now, you could make the argument, well, that obviously includes the high priest, or it doesn't. Unclear. But the rabbis, the commentaries, now we're going to look at some of the commentaries here to see what are they actually trying to say. So Ibn Ezra, he's talking about how we get to this, what it means. So he's quoting from two different places in Isaiah. Let your soul delight in fatness. We know that affliction of a soul must be the opposite of its delight, right? He's saying, well, this is what delight means. Therefore, when we're saying the opposite, delight and afflict, those are opposites. So when it's talking about delight means you enjoy the fatness, which means like a nice, heavy, yummy meal. Well, clearly then, if we're talking about the opposite, means it must be fasting. Okay. And he takes another place. The phrase "be generous to the hungry" means the same as satisfy the afflicted soul. Therefore, and he says that's the way the prophets speak in parallelisms. So therefore, we have this. Since we possess a tradition for the meaning of this idiom, there is no need to adduce additional evidence. Okay. Does not provide additional evidence, meaning that the word fasting is explicitly mentioned. The general rule is affliction of the soul denotes fasting wherever it happens to appear in Scripture. That's Ibn Ezra. Okay, he's saying afflicting absolutely means, and we've established this, it means fasting. Great. Now, Chizkuni, he's another commentator I really like him. Oops, I forgot to. Sorry, we don't need this whole part here. Oops, I'll just mess around with it later. Okay. It's meant to, all of you have been called Mikra Kodesh. Okay, fine. This day has been called Mikra. The Day of Atonement is an exception to all this. Instead of a day of enjoyment, we are deliberately causing ourselves discomfort. V'initem et nafshotechem. Prior to the giving of the first set of tablets, which Moses had smashed, the Torah had written that the elite of the people were accompanying Moses before he ascended the mountain to receive them. Right? What were they doing? Eating and getting drunk. It was stated there that God had not punished them for this on that occasion. What was that? Right? A clear indication that they had deserved to be punished. As a consequence, when they made the golden calf and treated it as a deity and danced around it, ate and drank, the result was that at least some of them ended up treating that calf as a deity by prostrating themselves in front of it. Later on, that golden calf, right? So therefore, as part of the atonement, a process completed on the 10th of Tishrei, when Moses brought them from the second set of tablets, eating and drinking was absolutely prohibited. Put another way, the Bible, Jewish law is usually there's a parallel, right? The manner in which you sinned is the manner in which you are punished, right? So they sinned by eating and drinking excessively and then worshiping and whatever. So when we're getting atonement for the sin of the golden calf on Yom Kippur, because we ate and drank excessively, now we fast and don't enjoy those things. Safe?
So is this why we prostrate ourselves on Yom Kippur in some shuls I've been to? Is that
Not really, no, because that is, we used to prostrate ourselves all the time at the Aleinu prayer. And for a couple different reasons, we now only do it on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and not everybody does. When I'm leading the service, I invite people to do it with me. It's a beautiful way to add a bit of physical reminder to just the simple words that we're saying. I usually have my talit covered, so I don't actually know who is doing it with or not. I don't know if there are actually a lot of people doing it or not, but it's a very powerful moment to, in a way, to submit yourself to the power of the day. But it's not because of that.
It's not
Okay.
like a way of asking for forgiveness for doing it, at one point in front of a fake deity.
Yeah, no, I see that's not what they're implying here. The main takeaway here is they sinned by eating and drinking excessively, and then they got carried away with the sin of the golden calf.
Yeah.
And then on Yom Kippur, remember, Yom Kippur was the day that they were granted atonement for that sin. Therefore, because they sinned by eating and drinking, they're punished. We are punished by not eating and drinking. Okay, so this is definitely following the idea that it's a day of punishment. That the afflicting is a punishment. Okay,
Yeah.
so someone was just about to ask a question, but I didn't see who it was.
I think Shira.
Shira, was that you?
No.
Oh, okay, that's okay. So I like this one. Abarbanel, he's an Italian commentator. Ibn Ezra, he's from Spain. Abarbanel is a little bit later, and he says, Ibn Ezra says in his comment that self-denial refers to fasting. With all respect for his scholarship, and whenever you see that, right, with all due respect, what does that mean?
He's about to lay it into him.
Right? And the rabbis do that quite a bit with each other. It's funny, but anyway.
On the contrary.
Yeah, exactly. Just because fasting is a form, is a form of self-denial, does not mean that all self-denial is fasting. What it means is one must deny oneself food, drink, sex, or any other pleasure for which one may have an appetite. Weakening the flesh gives more strength to that part of us which is eternal, the mind, to cleave to God.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, how would you say that in different words?
Takes away distraction.
It's a distraction. We are eliminating those distractions. And now coming back to that word, I think, Anna, you used it, transcending. Right? You are leaving those things behind because of the distraction. You don't need them on that day. What he's saying is, it's not afflicting yourself. You're doing self-denial, not as because you're punishing yourself. You're doing it to eliminate the distraction to what? Because all it does is weakens the mind. And you need the mind, the soul here, to cleave to God, right? So if you are so focused on those physical things, they get in the way of that transcendence that you are trying to achieve, that Moses achieved, the high priest achieved. That's why we need to do these things. Okay? That's this. So this is clearly focusing on that second interpretation, that it's actually adding to that day of holiness. Yeah. Question, Anna.
Yeah, why? I mean, I know that we fast. I don't know how many times a year we fast. I know it's more than once, but why is Judaism not fast? Why aren't we fasting more in Judaism?
Because we are not about self-flagellation. We're not about excessively. Because if the part of the idea of Tisha B'Av, for example, and that so many things are just added onto that day. Because if we were to have a day for all the horrible things that happen to us as Jews, we would have fast days constantly all over the place. Right? That's not what we're all about. We're all about, Oneg Shabbat and the beauty and the joy and right? Not to excess, obviously, but we want to limit the sadness. It's all in balance, right? So that's why. Okay. Finally, I think this is the last source here, the Mishnah Torah, right? This is halacha. Right? We have also learned from the oral tradition that it is forbidden to wash one's body, anoint oneself, wear shoes, or have sexual relations on it. Right? Yep, we know that, okay? And it is a commandment to refrain from all of these activities in the same manner that one refrains from eating and drinking, as it is stated, a Shabbat of rest, a Shabbat for the matter of eating. rest for these other matters. Now, I love what Rambam is doing here. What's he doing? What's he saying? He's saying that you don't, again, in a way, paraphrasing Abarbanel, you don't need it on that day. Just as you take a rest from all those other things on Shabbat, on normal Shabbat, it's not that you're not allowed to work. You don't need to work. Your soul needs that day to rest. Okay, it's a beautiful phrasing. It's not that you're not allowed to. It's you don't need to. You don't need it on that day. And he's saying Shabbat Shabbaton. That means that you don't need le'anyan, achila. In the idea, you don't need to eat. You don't need to drink. You don't need to have sex. You don't need those physical things, because that will only get in the way of what you need. It's right. And put another way, it's enabling, not afflicting our bodies. Right? It's enabling our bodies to be able to get to that moment of transcendence. That's I think, for me anyway, when I'm studying this and I'm getting myself ready for Yom Kippur, and on the day of Yom Kippur, this understanding is so much more meaningful to me. That it's not that I'm punishing myself or afflicting myself. It's I'm transcending, right? I am enabling myself to be able to get past that. So again, just looking at that three words. And so I really, the practicing self-denial, I remember I said at the beginning, it's not an exact translation, but New JPS, the translation, does a really good job of capturing the connotation there. And so I think, even though really, if you literally translate it, it's afflict your soul, that literal translation would totally put you in the wrong direction of what those words are trying to imply. It's not trying to imply that you need to punish yourself or afflict yourself. I love that. Practice self-denial in the positive way. Practice self-denial of physical things so you can transcend to the spiritual things.
And find joy in that.
And absolutely, and find joy in that. Absolutely find joy in it.
More than joy.
That initial question here, right? Affliction or joy? I always come down on the side of joy. For me, I love Yom Kippur. It's a beautiful, amazing experience. Yeah, it's exhausting, it's tiring, but if you can get through all that, how do you feel near the end, in the middle of Ne'ilah, when you are there with everybody, who's going through the whole thing? How do you feel at that point?
It's true.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, questions, comments, thoughts? By the way, we're going to start putting up these source sheets. We're putting the recordings up. I'm also going to be sending the source sheets as well.
Hi, Rabbi. Sylvie from Melbourne.
Yes, Sylvie.
It's interesting thinking about Yom Kippur in the light of joy, you know. To me, Yom Kippur is a very long day.
Yes.
And, you know, I normally end up with a bit of a headache. And I love all these different sort of texts that you've been sharing with us. And so there's a lot of food for thought there.
I want to be clear. This is an interpretation. It's not, it's in the time that I have, what I like to try and do is stay focused with one thread of one concept, one idea. There is a myriad of ways we could go, but there's one idea, that one way we can. So it's for people who sometimes are struggling with Yom Kippur, perhaps this is a different perspective, a different way to look at it. Somebody else had a question?
Yeah, I did.
Joan, I think it was you. Yeah.
Yes. This is the first time we've logged on to this with you. So
welcome, Shechayanu. See you next week.
Question might have been covered before. When it comes to joy, how do you fit in the book of life? And you know, on this day is decided who will live, who will die, and
so
where does that all come in?
So part of the joy is there's great trepidation or somberness to the day because you don't know. And then the joy explodes out as soon as it finishes because we've made it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering. I just didn't know whether it had been covered before, in one of the other sessions, but it is part of the joy. It would be part of the joy.
In a way, I sometimes think of it as it's a buildup of the joy to the end.
Yes.
Right? We're still here. We're still here.
Yeah.
We're still here. Oh, it's finished. We made it. Woo!
Yes.
Now go have your croissant or whatever you break your fast on.
You've made it this year, but you don't know what's going to happen during the year.
Well, that's a different question.
Yeah.
That's a different question. Anna,
Yeah,
lay it on me.
So you reach the end point, and how do you continue that through the year?
Well, that is the question. That is the difficulty. That is, and I've spoken about that a couple times. Like, how do you capture that magic? How do you capture that high? And part of it is maybe you can't. Maybe you, in a way, on Havdalah, how do you capture and bring with you a little bit of that essence of Shabbat into the week? Right? We have symbols like with the Besamim where we want to have that. The point is, I think one way you could answer is you can't live your whole life on that high. Right? There's ups and downs. It's the process and the transcendence. Part of the year is that process, and Yom Kippur is that payoff. Right? You can't have every single moment be that high. You can recall it, but and those moments that are those highs only are that beautiful and incredible because there was that buildup to it. So part of me would say, don't try and have the whole year be that high. That's part of it, what I would say. All right. Yes, Anita.
Oh, hi. Look, thank you. Sylvie told me about this. I'm also from Melbourne. I want to thank you very much. I really enjoyed your texts and comments. And I love the Hebrew word. I don't like the translation. It really means, the root is, well, you could interpret it as torture yourselves. But the word is to answer. And to be answerable has that sense of balance and that sense of justice. You can answer anger with goodness. You can answer holiness with an emptying of sin. So it's a wonderful, wonderful word. And that the singing that was heard, the voices that were heard, a kind of an answer and also a query, a question and an asking. And it's a wonderful view of a balance of the holy and the earthly coming together to reach each other. One coming down, one coming up to reach each other, an answer.
I think that answer is a beautiful way to look at it, because we also looked last week similar to, well, we were talking about Yom Kippur, and that the confession that you need to do, it's a reflexive verb in the Hebrew. And so again, it's about looking inward.
Yeah.
There's probably something there about that idea that if you were translating in a certain way, answer your soul. That's what you're supposed to do on Yom Kippur. Not afflict your soul, not punish yourself, but answer your soul would be a beautiful theological understanding of what that could mean. I like that.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Everybody have a wonderful evening. See you next week at 8:15. We're going to put these up online with the source sheets as well. And I will see you guys next week. If there's anything, by the way, you would like to cover within the portion, a specific verse or something like that. Oh, and I know, dare I say, I know it's Parashat Hashavua, but if it's not in the portion, that's okay too. Please, we take requests here. So we will see you soon next week. Hope all are well. And we will see you well. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected, everybody.
Thanks, Rabbi. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.